Hello everyone, Coffee Mug here. I'm going to give you a quick tour of my 150 signs per minute Gleba base. So here's the overall footprint from it. I have two of uh, the agricultural towers picking each fruit. So relatively small footprint here. I have two of the Yamako and two of the jelly fruits. So those just belt their way in. I have seeds coming in on one, fruit coming out on the other. All right, so here is my main base itself. So each fruit comes in from the left and the right. They just call it paths, and they branch off at different locations in base here. To start it off, I have all of my copper and iron production here, and then my science production over left. So we'll start with my ore production. So the branching off here on the left, I just have both of the plants come in and make their way around. If it right here, there's an inserter, or if it spoils, it comes off to the right, and that just loops around. Using input priority left here to use the oldest fruits first. And so down here, I just have a regular assembler that makes nutrients with spoilage. So this is kind of like a Kickstarter if the base were to ever shut down. All of this stuff would for the most part start spoiling, and then would kick it back up, start making nutrients again. And then I have a biochamber nutrient one next to even exacerbate that problem, pick up more fuel and go a little faster with the productivity bonus. And then here I have a bioflux nutrient center, which handles most of the nutrients on the belt. That contains this belt right here that it's on contains bioflux and nutrients. So I shut off the first Kickstarter once there's over 50 nutrients on the belt, and I shut off the second Kickstarter once there's 100 on the belt. And for the most part, the bioflux takes care of everything after that. So up here, I have the mash and Yamako fruits productions going on each side of the belt here. This one outserts off the top. If there is any spoilage in here, it just puts it out with the mash or the jelly. And so I have two of these, which produces 6 per second each. And then this one produces 12 per second. So these produce in total 12 of these intermediates per second, which is just slightly under what it needs to fill a red belt, which I left it that way just because I didn't really want to overproduce here. That'd just be a problem, I think. Well, maybe I should have, but yeah, I decided not to. Up here, this is plastic production, so this just takes in bioflux and some the extra Yamako mash that I'm not using up here with the bioflux, and that produces plastic, which goes off to the left. Then my bioflux is up here, so this is made with the jelly and the mash. So like I said earlier, these produce 12 per second. This consumes 10 per second of the mash and 8 per second of the jelly, so I do have a little bit extra jelly and mash. And that's what the plastic and the rocket fuel uses to make its different pieces. Speaking of rocket fuel, up here I have rocket fuel. This inserts a rocket directly into this heating tower, which then powers all of these turbines here. That's basically this right here powers most of the production facilities over here. So that's what these two production facilities are for. I've incorporated those directly into my iron production. So the bioflux and the nutrients make its way over here, down to these two biochambers that start off the iron cell cultivation. They're the basic iron bacteria. And so they'll input the well, this uses jelly, so it gets jelly from the nearby one here, which is making jelly out of this loop that came off to the right. So these make jelly, directly insert it for the cell bacteria, and the cell bacteria picks up nutrients from the middle belt and makes iron bacteria, which now it puts it on the right hand side. Any excess seeds or spoilage comes here on this inside belt. So the seeds get outputted here and then make their way down here, then down to my seed belts. And any of the seeds from the ones over here on the right go down this belt here on the left and combine down here with the seed belts. So the iron bacteria, after it's initially made here, moves up this way, and this is where the iron bacteria cultivations use the bioflux plus the raw cells, and those produce even more cells. And then I have them in this belt, which snakes its way around. I did a little extra here with the undergrounds, which I probably didn't need to, because this moves fast enough. But if there's any actual iron that gets output, it takes priority left here. Or it comes out here on the left, and then if it's produced here, it comes out on the right. And if it's not ready, it just loops back around and repeats. Then that gets outputted here. Over here in the middle, I snuck out my bioflux and my nutrients to a sulfur production unit. So this takes all of the spoilage here that isn't used to kickstart nutrients, comes over this way, and then the spoilage plus the bioflux makes sulfur. It looks kind of weird the way I did it. I probably didn't need to do both sides, but I wanted to make it look symmetrical, just for funs. So down here, the sulfuric acid makes its way over there, and I'll talk about that a little later. Or the sulfur makes its way over there. So if I had to redo this, things I'd probably do differently. I would probably not use this excess rocket fuel loop here. I probably just would have used the rockets to go do other things in the base. Maybe launch more rockets with. So I probably won't have done that in the future. Because I only needed two rockets to make enough rockets, so I probably just would have used this instead of using them as fuel. Not that I don't like the idea, but I think I probably could have rearranged that differently in the future. So anyway, once the iron and the copper make its way up here, the plastic also combines. This is enough. This makes about 15 per second, which is half of a red belt. And that should be enough to do half of a belt here. So I put some speed modules in here, so each of these do 1 per second. So I can make basically half a red belt there for each side. That comes down here. I shipped in some of my electromagnetic plants to make circuits. So I have all my green circuits here being made. Then over here I got red circuits being made. That's what the plastic was used for. Then the red circuits come over here to make blue circuits, and I really didn't need this many blue science productions. I really only needed 2 of them. I just had the extra just for extra blue circuits for other things. So I probably could have had only 2 there. That would have been fine. Then over here, this is where I make my low density structures. So all the extra iron that's not being used comes and gets smelted, makes low density structures. And then sulfur, which I talked about earlier, makes its way over here. We make some sulfuric acid with the remnants of the iron there. And I also have a little bit of bullet production there. So that's my main production over here. And then if you come over here, this is where the actual research happens. So the left-hand side of this right here is effectively the same as it was for the other 2, because this is just made to reduce bioflux effectively, and I got rid of the plastic plant there. And now the bioflux and nutrients come up here. This is where I have my pentapod egg production center. It'll basically output it here and then pick up any it needs, and that just goes around, and that makes pentapod eggs on the belt. If there's more than 20 on the belt, I have this lever here which activates. So if it starts, producing too much, because this will get productivity bonuses and make extra sometimes, and so this will take up any extra that I may have. Down here is my agricultural science, which only needs the pentapod eggs and the bioflux. So we get the bioflux. It's looping around on my longer belt this time, instead of having the copper or iron bacteria. So it loops around and picks up its stuff it needs to make agricultural science and outputs it here This is capable of making about 151.2 per minute, or we'll just round 150 per minute. The science goes in here. Any excess spoilage from stuff that's not being used just gets output here. Should probably have a green inserter. I feel like that would be necessary at some point. Then all of the extra spoilage will just make its way up here, and then be burnt in this tower as well. I have a few of these Tesla turrets here just in case my pentapod eggs go bad. Over here, very similar to the iron bacteria production or the copper production, I have the outside loop here with the jellies directly inserting to make rocket fuels, and this is what I use for my rocket fuel belt. So I mentioned earlier I probably didn't need to do that, and I could have just used the ones up here, but you know, you live and learn. So yeah, so then all of the rocket fuel and the low density structures and the blue circuits make their way over to the rocket. At first I was a little worried about if this was going to be enough production, but generally I found that it launches rockets faster and it builds the rocket parts faster than it takes to actually consume the 100 signs per minute that I'm actually consuming. So overall I am pretty happy with how this turned out. Gleba, on the whole, I thought was a really interesting planet. It reminded me of a lot of Fulgora, where on Fulgora you had to loop around scraps over and over to then keep kind of the recycling loop going. It's kind of like what this is like. You just have to loop stuff around and round, and instead of, you know, outputting parts you don't need to be recycled, you output the spoilage. Right? And so that's kind of the similarities between the two. One of the least intuitive of the new 3 planets, but I do really like it. I think it was actually a really fun, challenging planet. Like the gameplay loops are really interesting. Sometimes frustrating, right? Because the stuff spoils and you're not used to your stuff just decomposing. So once you kind of learn to handle that, I think it turned out to be a really fun and really interesting planet. So I really enjoy Lebo. Despite the frustrations I had. Some things I'd probably do differently is I waited way too long just to kind of a dedicated power production center, and that was kind of a waste because I had a lot of power issues at the start. In hindsight, I was trying to do each of the inner 3 core planets just like landing and using only stuff that I built there. And so I think that was actually a lot harder on Gleba because it does take a while to get like your ore refining up. You actually need a lot of things before you can actually do that. So I think that makes that especially challenging on this planet. So I probably would have shipped in more turbines and got a independent power source set up first in the future. You know, next time I don't plan on kind of doing each planet like I did this time. So I'm going to probably ship in the turbines and the heat exchangers and get a separate power, kind of mining to power system set up, probably with the jelly nuts. So I think those are one of the more energy nutrient dense items. So I would have done that first, set the power up first. I was unsure if half of a belt of each ore would be enough, but it was. So this is, you know, going to be really good for my starter base. Once I start with the Megabase process, which I'm probably going to have to start soon, I'll need to think about how I want to handle all of this here. I'll probably ship in some foundries and calcite and do something with that for the Megabase part of it. But this would be a good starter base, I think. I like the way this turned out. So that's what another thing I would do differently is I can get this set up way faster. It took me like 3 or 4 different builds to try to figure this out, and so now I kind of have an idea of how this works. It's not the cleanest. I don't know if I like the way the sulfur is here. I may, you know, change that in the future. And I mentioned the rocket parts here. I would just use directly for a rocket and not have them power and then have the power independently. I do kind of like the design overall. There are some changes I made when I made this third one that I would incorporate over to these. There's some small differences for how the seeds are handled that I would have done differently. But that's third minor things. So the science part I thought was the easiest. Like once I figured out how to get all the bioflux and nutrients being made at a consistent basis, I think producing the science was pretty easy because you only need two things, and I already spent so much time figuring out bioflux. Right, you just had to copy it over and repeat it. Um, the pentapod eggs I thought was pretty easy to handle as far as like finding a way to burn the extras without guys popping out everywhere. So that was the last thing I did, and I think it turned out to be easiest based on what I learned about building the other parts of the base. And so one thing I am thinking about what I'm gonna have to do when I start the Megabase process for this. Again, I mentioned in shipping in the calcite and the foundries to, instead of doing just iron smelting. So of course I would have to do that. I would probably have independent bioflux production and just have it shipped on a train to wherever it needs to be. A really kind of short, like a single like bioflux production center, I think is what I might have. And then I'll just ship that where it needs to. If that would work, I don't know. This is really this is going to be a really fun planet, I think, to try to scale up in. So yeah, it's going to be interesting when I get to the Megabase part. But overall, Gleba is a really cool planet. I really enjoyed it. I know a lot of people I've seen on the social media don't seem to like it, but I think it was actually very, very fun. Not a planet I would do first. It's a planet I would definitely want to ship a lot of things into, though. So, I hope you've been enjoying the series so far, and you've been following along. We're about to start scaling up to Megabase soon, so I'm really excited for that. And I will catch you in the next episode.